Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It is time for another channel map. Channel map crap, you may ask? Well, yes, probably, because we're already a week into April, and I'm coming at this a little bit late, but that's just how things have been. In fact, that's one of the first things we can talk about in this initial recap phase of channel maps, where I go over events that happened in the previous month and talk about what I nailed in terms of what I wanted to do and did do, and then what I didn't really nail in terms of what I wanted to do but didn't do, and then some stuff that came by surprise that I didn't know I wanted to do until I did them. And so there's a little bit in every category there, but up first, of course, is the fact that we're all recovering, still trying to remain sane and steadfast within the face of the COVID-19 insanity that has occurred. So, of course, it only makes sense to just mention that. It is, of course, the elephant in every room from now on until the end of this year, perhaps, until July, until the end of the summer, who knows. But for a while, it will apparently be with us. So I hope everybody has been doing okay, at the very least, if not better than okay. And if you're not, I hope that your fortune changes soon. And or just a blanket sort of generic reminder you've probably heard all over the place that we are indeed all in this together. And then we are going to need to, rely on each other to provide some sense of security or stability in a times as trying as these. Generally, what I find to be the most useful is to find something that gives you that sense of choice, of power, to still do something where many of your other choices are no longer able to be made. Like you can't choose to go out to the gym or to the bar or to school, even in many cases, or to work in some cases. So making a choice and being able to make that choice regularly is definitely something that's going to be helpful. And that's why I'm very grateful to still have had the opportunity to do these daily streams that I have been doing and to keep up with the classic FPS as I had been planning on for quite a while. And the fact that we were able to make good on those plans, and the fact that going into the month of March, where I had not yet really planned around the whole coronavirus stuff, it really hadn't set in to the same degree by then, I don't think. And obviously also February, the fact that we were able to just the past couple of months be relatively stable, relatively similar in terms of our output, even if, some things did fail to meet the mark, and some things that were presumed to be regular, like the podcasts, for example, or the CSGO Map Analysis videos, those have slowed in terms of how frequently you'll see them, just due to the circumstances, due to how busy I am, and where my little free time actually is it's usually spent on some of my projects. So that tends to be how it goes. So despite the fact that we weren't able to do everything that we wanted to get done in terms of what our original plans were going into this past month of March, I hope that the regularity of the content in general has been, at the very least, I don't want to say a breath of fresh air, because it's how it was before, but that's what I hope it felt like. I hope it felt like nothing had really changed in that regard, because at least there was that one thing that you could point to and say, yeah, there's that stayed the same. So hopefully that was a provision I was able to provide. And otherwise, like I said, I hope you guys are doing well. Funnily enough, my life has not really changed that much besides everybody else's stress levels going up. And of course, you're naturally going to increase your own stress levels when that happens. So I suppose I have been a little bit more stressed lately, but I think I've been channeling it okay. I think the biggest hit was probably the fact that I can't go to the gym anymore. So I've been doing home workouts and just running a little bit more frequently in the store while working when I do indeed work. But I work just the same. I guess my work schedule is a little bit more hectic in terms of the hours that I do work are the same, but when I do work those hours, tends to be more people in the store, more stressed out individuals in the store as my coworkers and as just people in there. So, you take what you can get, I guess, but that has been really the main difference. That and the fact that, just in general, my family and my friends are also stressed out over this. Everybody's stressed out over it. So as long as there's some things that do stay the same, maybe that stress doesn't boil over, right? We can hope anyway. So that was the big, obviously, first topic that I wanted to cover. Hopefully things get better from here, or at the very least, not much worse before they get better. We can hold those two hopes in our hands. Otherwise, there was, of course, the last stages of the full toilet of Mapcrap at the very beginning of March. That was weird to think back on, actually, but indeed, those were the last couple of days, and then there was some updates after the official day for the map to be deployed. And I did indeed update my submission a little bit. And one of the things that was a generic sort of progress update was that there was a general sense of improvement, in addition to the general sense of stability from continuing to do day-to-day work. There was a sense that throughout this entire month of March, I was able to really zone in and try to systematically update my technique when it comes to writing AI, and to a lesser extent, some other things like just producing content in general, but also designing levels and tech trees. My full toilet was a very big experiment in the tech tree department, and one that I didn't spend a whole lot of time doing a lot of unit testing for, beyond just making sure that the unit functioned the way that I wanted them to. And part of that was just brought on by the fact that we had access to a bunch of assets from that Five Nations game that I've been slowly chipping away at ever since the full toilet. I think I did like 2 or 3 extra units since then. And obviously it's been fairly slow going compared to when I did like a whole bunch of them as test runs to see how the process would look like. But ultimately, I think it comes down to something that looks okay when contrasted against default StarCraft assets. And certainly better placeholders than anything I've seen for, in the running for most of the stuff that I ended up using it for, either for the full toilet submission or for Hydra units. I actually used a few of them for Hydra Protoss and Terran units so far, and perhaps I will use some for the Zerg as well. And so until DF has the time and willpower to pop open his 3DS Max copy and fire away at the various model requests that I've got him at, we may be able to rely on the Five Nations game for those kinds of assets for stuff like Hydra. So that's exciting. But even beyond the tech tree stuff and beyond the level design stuff, I do feel like in general, I'm able to point at my AI now and point at my AI at the beginning of March, like the beginning of April to the beginning of March. The AI is so different. I think I talked about this in one of the dad calls. It's so distinct comparatively. There's a complete like 180 in terms of what I prioritize, how much I prioritize keeping things in functions that loop, and basically making decision-making options for the AI, and deciding how frequently they check certain conditions and how frequently they do decide to do a certain action. For example, building a defensive structure and basing that off of how much damage they've been dealt in recent history in the map up until that point. And if it's over a certain amount, then they will prioritize the defensive structure, i.e. they'll wait a shorter amount of time before getting that request. So stuff like that has been really useful in terms of improving the dynamic feeling of the AI, where the AI does actually feel like it's responding to your actions and your pressure and your success and failure. And if you are unsuccessful at handling the AI, then they have less and less money to spend on things like defenses. They are more likely to take earlier expansions or more aggressive expansions, like wait less amount of time before trying to set up another expansion. Whereas before, if you were being more, putting more pressure on them, they would spend more time before doing things like expanding or attacking, and less time between adding more defenses and guards. And the whole point is to have a little bit of a tug of war in that department, like a push and pull, a give and take for how aggressive they are versus how defensive they are, and how conservative they are in terms of expanding outward and doing all this other stuff. Right now their tech paths are fairly randomized instead of like it's just pure RNG before I have some time to really figure out exactly how I want to handle the tech paths in a functional sense, like on an implementation level. But on a conceptual level, the basic idea is just to determine the pressure in the past X amount of minutes and since the map began, and then tech switch to either pivot to something that will bail them out of a tough situation, pivot to something that will help them close the gap and absolutely destroy their opponent if they already have a distinct advantage and they want an early power spike. Otherwise, they will maintain the course, stay the course, and keep going down the path that they were already planning on going at the beginning of the map. And so it's kind of, you got a couple of different options there. Obviously, you can further fragment it depending on how ahead they are or how far behind they are based on how much pressure has been given to them. For example, you could have a situation where the AI decides to take an early expansion if they're ahead, but if they're super far ahead, then they forgo that expansion and put down like 2 extra gateways and just pump out some more units off of one base or something like that. You could easily see where situations could be further fragmented and more instruction could be given depending on more specific checks and balances when it comes to the conditionals. So the more freedom we have for that and the more commands that are coming out from iquare, and To a lesser extent, Nave. I think Nave has made some updates that I'm not sure how many of those we've added to our own commit, but again, I say we, it's all iquare right now anyway. But yeah, there's definitely been some improvement in the tools department, but I do think that a big part of that is my own, a big part of the improvement to my technique, and to a lesser extent, a part of why the tools were updated in the certain directions that they were updated in came from the fact that my mindset changed from wanting a prescriptive sort of linear set of instructions. Obviously, my AI was always a little bit function-based in that sense, a little bit less linear than the Blizzard AI, eventually significantly less linear. Now it's completely unrecognizable, basically. So the fact that I went whole hog in that department, I think, really helped this sort of depiction of an AI that is dynamic, that does respond to your actions and inputs, and keeps things, competitive, and has instructions to help bail it out of a bad situation, to play defensively or conservatively, and also to punish players if they already feel like they have an upper hand based on the conditionals that I put in. This does open up all sorts of different failure points, as with anything that adds more variability or more looped functionality instead of just a linear prescriptive sequence of events that happens no matter what the conditions are. But that's sort of the department you need to make your stay in and stake your claim in if you're going to have an AI that actually does, again, respond to events. So that's a big deal. And that's been, I would say, the second biggest news of March in general is that the AI and the techniques and the mindset behind what shapes my techniques and what shapes my AI to begin with, and my personalities that I inject into those AI. That the mindset definitely changed on an implementation level, but also on a conceptual level, where I'm conceiving AI as instructions or personality, rather. It's like personality traits passed on to a player. That's basically how I've decided to conceptualize AI as for the time being. And the closer I can get my actual scripts to reflect that conception, the better I think the AI will perform under a more broad range of situations and scenarios. So that's how I've been thinking of it lately. Moving on, we do indeed have some progress updates for some of the projects. This includes Hydra vZergo 1 and Hydra in general. So I recently implemented the basic materials for the Azazel, which is a science vessel alteration. I did a huge amount of tech tree reworking, still some more to come when it comes to the Azazel. Now it does actually require a science facility instead of before it just required like an engineering bay and a control tower, I think. And you actually got its research at the control tower. Now it does require a science facility. On the flip side, I am thinking of increasing the gas cost of science facilities, but making them only require armories. And as another potential step, I think this is less definitive. I'm more on the fence about this one, but making the armory require a command center instead of a barracks to allow straight like 10-10-10 builds or it wouldn't really be 10-10-10, but you'd get like a refinery and a depot around the same time, and then bank gas until you had an armory. You could do a factory rush. It would be a super ballsy opener where you have no backup if you get scouted or something. But in a situation in Hydra missions where maybe you have an AI ally to try and absorb your pressure, or vice versa, where you're in a position where your AI ally is being a little bit more safeguarded in that sense, maybe this kind of early opener would work for a fast factory or a fast starport rush or something, where you could hit an enemy with some air units before they even have hydras or spores or anything. In theory, it could happen. Certainly rather niche in that case, but the other extended flexibility of it, anyway, would be that you, at the very least, will have the science facility change, I think, as a result of this mindset that I've tried to work Terran towards, where it's more about being flexible and being able to change up your build, having so many different build threads that you can go down, like build paths, I suppose is a better term. Time will tell how those changes stick, if they stick at all, but just some stuff I've been considering. And as a result of the new game state being further developed and the plans for the maps becoming a little bit more clear, I also made the decision recently in the last month or so to cut the Brood War plans entirely. And so we're just going to be focusing on the first 3 campaigns. For one, because 3, and for another, because I actually find Brood War to be much less attractive an option as far as updating content goes. The dialogue would be absolutely infuriating, and the only alternative that I can think of for that would be to inject more of my own fanfiction, original character, OC characters into the Brood War maps than would make sense or would feel comfortable. Whereas like I've had like one or two in vanilla Hydra for each race. You get some of the, like a CAG is a Cerebrit that's technically in the lore, but I've decided to put him in as like I have an idea for his character. Obviously, like Arak as well is technically in the lore, but I don't think ever makes a named appearance, as well as Gorn as well. I don't think either of them make a named appearance. So in a way, that's not really fanfiction OC characters, but I'm providing them all of their character and writing. And then, of course, you've got George Randall and a couple of other people in the Terran campaign as allies and enemies. They're more or less meant to be like minor figures, and they're not really meant to be a story-focused project anyway. Hydra is obviously about the gameplay, but the bottom line is I wouldn't want to extend it too far into Brood War, and I certainly wouldn't want to carry over those characters over into Brood War. It's just a completely different setting, more or less, because of how much they focus on interpersonal conflicts. And on top of that, it would have resulted in a brand new race for the UED instead of them being a subfaction of Terran, which I think makes sense, but also is way beyond the remit of what I feel like working on, sometime next year or something. So hopefully we can get a lot of progress done on Hydra this year, and we can see an end in sight by the end of next year for the first 3 campaigns. And at that point, we'll be able to have ourselves quite a party, because we'll have done those 3 campaigns. We'll be able to move on using the Hydra new game state as the basis for all of my other Brood War projects, should there be Brood War projects after in sometime in 2021. So that's sort of update on the projections, I suppose. A more local thing that happened was V-Zergo 1 did indeed receive an update, but as we were doing the update, we ended up finding some more limitations of some of the new changes that we've made, and again, the new techniques that we've been able to adopt as a result of changing my mindset regarding how I conceptualize AI. And until we get some changes, which I've documented in a private page on my Wikidot for DF and for iquare, we are going to hold off on making too many more Hydra updates or Hydra maps or whatever. We may end up doing some more work on some levels, right? Just the level design or whatever of some of the remaining missions, because there's plenty of those that need to get done. But there needs to be some serious increases in AI functionality, some serious additions in terms of new AI commands, as well as, of course, the new game state needs to be further shaped up with new art and new units and all the other things that go with that. So for my part, I've tried to do everything that I can to make sure that the list is as concise as possible and handles the stuff that's absolutely important so that we can have more updates. V-Zergo 1 saw a lot of action when it was updated, and its limitations became clear after about a week or so, and then I realized I needed to rehash some of that AI with some of the new setup and some of the new technique that I learned afterwards working on Total Deer, which was a Mapcrap map that didn't end up getting finished in time for Mapcrap. Instead, I just ended up slowly working on it for about like 10 days, I think it was, out of the month of March. And then I went back to working on Inconsummate, which is obviously what I'm going to talk about next. So it seems like until we get the tools necessary to bring the new AI technique really to the forefront without having any dysfunction, we should be good. Once we get that, we should be good, rather. Until we get that, I'm going to be working on some other small stuff, but I'll get to that later on. And then, of course, there is Inconsummate. So Inconsummate has a pretty significant amount of progress on the first mission done. In fact, we have first draft AI for both of the 2 opponents that you're going to see, and a first draft layout as well. I have decided to wait until, very similar to the Hydra stuff, I've decided to wait until the technical tools and specifications are up to snuff, and we have the ability to actually use some of the ideas that I've come up with. And once I'm at the point where I can comfortably say, based on my Hydra testing, oh yeah, these functions are working now, and I've developed a technique, I'm going to return and update the Inconsummate AI for that particular purpose. Until then, the only Inconsummate mod streams you will see are probably going to be art streams where I work on the Ruined Terrain project, basically my catch-all term for all of the corpses and everything else, like wreckage and whatnot. And I will also, of course, be working on some layouts for the later missions. So you may see me doing some work on the second mission, for example, which has yet to begin, but presumably will at some point in the near future. Otherwise, I think that was it for the Brood War stuff. Like I said, there was a general sense of improvement across AI and a bunch of other fields, but I think I talked about that relatively in depth. The forum is, of course, a new addition as well. This is the last recap thing that I have, at least written down. I may remember something else later. But the forum is pretty crazy. A pretty nice addition, I think. It's really made me think a little bit more in depth about some of the topics that I would otherwise just be writing about in passing in a very, I would say, a rather dismissive manner on Discord. It's made me really make sure that I'm clarifying my position. I'm making clear my ideas or my take. And I think it opens up the doors for additional conversation from other members. So if you're not already on the forum and you are on the Discord server, you're just part of the community in general, I might recommend that you hop on there, because even though the number of conversations that we're having are fairly small, I think it's probably going to stay that way always. And we're just going to continue to keep things consistent when it comes to handling the overall setup of that kind of conversation. I hope that people who come into the forum are greeted with pretty decent conversation that you wouldn't really get otherwise in any other place otherwise. And so hopefully you come in there, you see that sort of sets the trend, and we'll all work to lead by example. I still have to post some more stuff on there. Like we talked about heroes in RTS. We talked about the fan fiction or whatever element of custom campaigns and canonized custom campaigns as well. The idea that like Insurrection and Retribution and other similar officially authorized projects end up receiving disproportionate amount of attention from fans, even if their quality does not provide enough of an explanation for that. So we talked a little bit about why that might be, and we all had some ideas. Just some thought-provoking conversation in general, if I don't mind saying so myself. And I hope to continue that, even if it necessarily remains niche, because most people prefer instant messaging and stuff. I think this is like an answer to the junk food type of conversation that you typically have on a Discord server. I thought our Discord server in general was pretty good about having decent conversations, but this will push it in a more formalized direction where if you don't mind writing a couple paragraphs here and there, you'll be right at home. And of course, if you don't mind reading a couple paragraphs as well, you'll be right at home in that forum. So just another PSA about that. All right, so now we, 22 minutes in, can talk about our plans for April. So that was a very lengthy recap. I do apologize for my lack of brevity. We do indeed have some updates. So like I said, I will be working on things that are not Inconsummate and not directly related to Hydra campaign mission remakes. That will be my first Brood War plan for you, is the Mapcrap update. So I'm going to go back to, I already have gone back to, the Mapcrap missions that I never finished. So far these are Conspira 3 and Total Deer. And those both use the Hydra game state. And of course, Crap Council, which is my quote-unquote finished, at least it shipped during the Mapcrap event submission for Season 3, Episode 3. That map could certainly use some updates, and will probably be updated along with the stuff that I am working on right now, Total Deer and Conspira 3. Those maps never got released, so it would be nice to finish them up and send them off. But of course, the AI problems are still rather pernicious, so until we fix those, they won't really see a complete release, but at the very least, you may end up seeing some significantly functional AI in a manner that you didn't see before. So at the end of their cycle, I will update them one final time with the latest in the technology once the tools are there, and I will ship those. And those will be just released as if they were any other map, right? So I don't think I'll throw them into the Mapcrap commit, because they're not really Mapcraps anymore. I've certainly spent a lot more time on them than a Mapcrap. By the time that they're done, I'll have spent even more time on them, obviously. So yeah, we'll see where that goes. But that's the first thing that I can sort of pour my energy into while I wait for some updates for the new game state, for the AI, and for the tools that we have. Another thing that I did gloss over, of course, is that we actually have seen some tool updates outside of what iquare has done with the AI script extender plugin and with my new game state for Hydra. We've also, for one, we've released the experimental A's, which includes all of the stuff you would need for the new game state of Hydra, at least on the A's side. Obviously, I haven't released the GPTP stuff or the framework for the Hydra new game state yet, which I still have to do for Mapcrap. I will make sure to get on that this month. But outside of releasing that with the help of iquare, I was also able to significantly overhaul the documentation for the extended AI command guide and link the resources, clean up the resources section at the top, clean up some resources elsewhere in the Wikidot as well. And finally, Vic was able to help me massively and help everybody massively by updating the Python modding suite. So we no longer have to separate our commits between A's and the general Poiquart one. We can just use Vic's updated A's one, and it contains a whole host of fixes, and it's still being maintained as I understand it. So hopefully we'll see even more improvements as time goes on. I've also started formalizing the requests for that in the wish list. So that should help him keep track of those as well. But he's been a big help in that regard. So be sure to react clap emoji or something for him at some point when you see him on Discord. Now, outside of that, and outside of the Mapcrap updates, I do want to continue working on Inconsummate 2.0. Like I said, I'll probably be focusing on level 2's design and the, in general, art creation rather, of the various assets. And for Hydra, I would like to work on VTerrano 1 some more. I've got rough draft AI for 2 players. I've got 4 AI to go as a result. And I still need to really buckle down and figure out what I want the early game to look like for that map for each AI. And also how they will respond to a quote-unquote AI, like a player, no longer behaving the same way that my AI player did. Because obviously when you slot a player into the Magistrate slot or the Rainer slot, they will potentially not go the same build order or attack vectors or whatever. Like, they're not going to have the same personality, odds are, to my AI personalities that I invented for the sake of the map. So I've got to imagine more broad strokes, like how will an AI respond to any player aggressing, regardless of whether or not it's the AI player or if it's a free-form human player. So that'll be interesting. That's not really the first time I'm thinking about that, but definitely one of the first times that I've uttered those words in that particular chain, where I'm thinking, yeah, I am prescribing in some sense an outcome for the game by making all of these AI an AI and then testing based on that. I can't just test on that, obviously. I never do just test on AI versus AI matches, but it's certainly interesting to see the results vary between different playthroughs, and obviously that's something that you'll always see, but one of those things that I'm going to have to keep in mind. And outside of VTerrano 1, outside of Mapcrap, outside of Inconsummate, I will still be working with iquare on his assets for his Project Overlord, and I will still be working with DF on the collaboration there. So not much has changed in that regard. Although the DF collaboration has slowed a bit, I still have to do some final level design touches on that map. And then, of course, we're just waiting for a whole bunch of new art so that I can slot all that in. And eventually there'll be AI and tech tree changes and a bunch of other stuff. So we're waiting on that, but we will see how far that goes. On the video side of things, classic FPS with Dynamo will continue. It is something that we began in the month of March, I believe. Yeah, I think we definitely banged out Wolfenstein in the month of March, and I believe we may have even banged out Doom 1 in the month of March, but if not, that was very early April. Yeah, it almost certainly was, at least partially. I'll just verify that right now. So it looks like we started it on the last day of March, and we finished it on Wednesday the 1st of April. So that was our April Fool's prank for you. It's to prank me in the middle of recording this channel map. So that will continue. We just sat down the first segment of Doom 2. Hopefully we can finish the whole thing tomorrow, and in the second segment, of course. And then I guess after that it'll be Duke Nukem 3D, and following that it'll be Quake 1. And then we'll decide if we want to add any final, last-minute ones to our list. But pretty soon we'll be done with Let's Plays in that sense. That'll be the first phase of our classic FPS playthroughs. Eventually we'll go back and play some mods and some lesser-known FPS games, like Power Slave and so on. And we'll see where that goes and how much fun those end up being. And we might even play some of the newer stylized ones, like Ion Fury obviously came out recently, and then not as newer, I think it's Dusk or something, or Wrath. I don't remember the names. They were talking about those in the most recent stream, but we may end up playing some of the more recent attempts at making a retro FPS game in that sense, a classic FPS game in that sense. So who knows what'll happen there, but definitely interested in that. Otherwise, as far as video plans go, I do still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. It looks like 8 maps that I've planned on doing videos for. However, I believe only 5 of those are leftover maps from the Exotic Places excuse me, exotic places contest. I need to drink more water, obviously. And the last 3 are just maps that are of personal interest to me. I do also have some plans of casting a contest match, like a sort of tournament, exposition tournament for some wingman stuff over on Mapcore. They have a Faceit hub, and CSGO players have been apparently practicing some wingman matches. So those are obviously 2v2, not 5v5. Might be interested for me to dip my toes into casting. Of course, I don't expect it will be a particularly professional or even polished cast. I have not casted CSGO ever, so it's a good opportunity, but I don't know if the times align, so I may end up doing that from replays or something, and we'll see what happens. But at the very least, I will probably make some analysis videos for the maps, at least the ones that are more interesting to me, if not all of them. So I think there's 6 of those. So that brings our total up to, I believe, because I don't think one of the 8 that I just listed, it is a wingman map, but I don't think it's in this contest. So if that's not an overlap, then we have a total of 14 videos that I still have to make in the CSGO map analysis video contest or context. And I was doing like 2 to 3 a week, and I'm not doing that anymore. And this week will not have 2 to 3. So odds are we're still going to be doing those by the end of April, whereas the classic FPS streams will almost certainly be done by the end of April. And then I will be straying away from Let's Plays, which I'll talk a little bit more at the end, which is fast approaching. So some more miscellaneous stuff. I did talk last channel map about Brood War map analyses. I have not received any Brood War maps that people want analysis on, so I have not had the opportunity to experiment with that, but it should not be that difficult to come up with a method that will allow me to record a video similar to the way that I was recording those CSGO ones, and just use some spawn commands from the AI debug plugin to spawn revealers or comsats or whatever to allow me to do my thing and show the map, and maybe do some dummy like test areas that show some pathfinding issues or whatever. Ideally, these maps would be functional with AI enemies, and they would be in some state of finality where they could at least be completed from start to finish, either through victory or defeat. Well, both, ideally. Like your triggers are working. But even if you just hand me a layout, I could at least look over it in the editor and maybe hop into a game and use scanner sweep and all that other stuff that I was just mentioning. But again, I haven't received anything. So if you want your map analyzed and you want to help me figure out how to actually do that in a format that makes sense for videos, then feel free to send them to me. Obviously, I'm probably not going to be editing any of those videos, so I have to figure out some way to dry run it in the similar way that I do the CSGO map analyses. Hopefully I can figure that out for Brood War as well. Shouldn't be too difficult, but just something that I know I mentioned last month. It's not for lack of trying, it's for lack of content to actually review, so eventually I'll get there. Otherwise, there were 2 other points that I wanted to mention here before going into the last section. So on self-education regarding programming, I have not actually done much in that department. The most that I can argue in favor of me learning a bit about programming is that I've become more familiar with the mindset that I think I will be carrying over into coding because of the fact that I've changed my mindset and my conceptualization of AI in Brood War. Now, obviously that seems like a cop-out or an ass-pull or something, but I actually do think that conceptualizing the AI more as recipients of functions and like conditional instructions as opposed to linear instructions will probably help me out a lot in how I construct code in the future, even if it's not for AI. So we'll see where that goes. And in related news, Unreal and Unreal Engine 4, I was talking about dipping my toes into that. Did not do any mod streams or Unreal streams, game streams, dev streams of Unreal. And I actually have not opened it up at all in at least 2 weeks, if not longer. So that is something that I need to get back into doing, even if it's only a couple minutes a day. It is a little difficult for me to justify running such an expensive program for only 5 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever it ends up being. But I do think it needs to happen, just so that I can continue to familiarize myself with stuff. However, on a somewhat related note, I am going to be penning a design document for my FPS game that I am going to be making in Unreal as a sort of experiment first-time approach, with the idea that, assuming I'm able to be competent within the Unreal Engine, I should be able to actually make this FPS game, as opposed to it just being something that like I'm using to experiment with. It's both an experiment with the engine and an experiment with the genre, but I do have intentions of actually finishing it. So really, I just want to make something that we can play on Fraud Night that won't be complete shit or polarizing for too many people or whatever. It is going to have movement from these classic FPS games that we've been going for. At the very least, the base movement speed will be like that. I don't know that I'll do the strafing, but I will probably at least include some sort of jiggle peak or some sort of movement-based, scale-based mechanic that helps you with aiming or avoiding shots. We're going to see exactly how that plays in when we get there. Maybe I'll tone down the movement, base movement speed just slightly, but it won't be as slow as CSGO is. So that may please some of you more veteran shooters out there. Otherwise, I've got a whole host of ideas for how the economy is going to work and all that stuff. The core game mode will actually be similar to Unreal Tournament Assault, from what I've been told. I've never played Unreal Tournament. I likened it to the objective-based game mode of Battlefront, the Star Wars Battlefront games, where you are taking objectives and pushing the enemy's respawn points back, which I believe is very similar to Unreal Tournament Assault. It's probably where they got the idea from. But that's where I was exposed to it first, so that's how I always conceptualize it. When I eventually play Unreal Tournament 99, and similar games, I will probably just refer to it as that, assuming that does, in fact, fit it. But that'll be the core game mode, and there will be an economy, and there will be all sorts of different things for buying weapons and vehicles and gadgets and all this other stuff. So I've already got a bunch of ideas in that sense. Sort of like creating a tech tree for an RTS. I've got tons of ideas like that for an FPS. It's just how how the underlying systems work, and especially how the shooting and movement works. Those are really important to get down, and then I can worry about like economy and weapon balancing and all this other stuff as time goes on. I think the biggest, most daunting task of all is figuring out the art stuff for me. It's not really the programming stuff. I feel like I can handle the programming, or I can learn enough about it to get a hack job done. At the very least, it may not perform very well. It may not have all the functionality that I need for the future, but I can get some hack job done to get a proof of concept in. The biggest deal is the art. Making everything look even remotely passable on a developer texture level is going to be very challenging. So we're basically going to gray box everything out, and DF has expressed interest in helping me with that, so we'll see where that goes. Of course, not holding him to anything. I'm already asking a lot of him to give me a bunch of art assets for a remake of the campaign and a bunch of other stuff. So the idea that he's also going to just be like, oh yeah, I'll make an art for an entire FPS game. Like, well, you volunteered yourself, buddy, but I'm not going to hold you to that because that's a pretty fucking hefty promise. So don't worry about that, man. All right, so that was the last of the plans for the immediate future and the notes that I had for those plans. Now, I've decided, instead of saying next month, because I've said next month about compilations and video essays a lot for the past, ever since these channel maps started, I think at least one of those has been in the next month category. In the future, sometime in the future, hopefully soon, but I can't make any time constrained promises, in part because of the whole COVID thing, and also in part because I'm just endlessly busy, apparently. I will be moving away from Let's Plays. This means that after the classic FPS games are done, the first phase of those, Dynamo and I will conclude that first phase with a sort of podcast style, the classic review style of conversation where we just talk for a while. That'll probably be about an hour and a half. I don't know how long it'll be, but we're basically just going to walk through the whole idea of what a classic FPS is to us, how we conceptualize it, the characteristics of it, how it differs from the later games, and how we feel it's better and worse, and what improvements could be made without it going the way of Half-Life and Halo and all those other games that are very obviously, self-evidently not great in that department. And this is, the reasons for this are several. They are legion, but I think the biggest two are, one, I absolutely need more free time to work on projects. This is Unreal, this is StarCraft projects, this is, video essays and editing and stuff. For another, I just don't think Let's Plays are that great content-wise. They're obviously very cheap in terms of the amount of time that I have to put into versus the time that you get out of them, because they're just dry run shit. Aside from some idle time that you skip through, you basically get a 1-to-1 conversion ratio of time spent working on the video content and time spent digesting the video content in that sense. There's very little extra time is put into it. I do put in some time to set things up and make sure that the audio is okay at the very least, if not great. And then I spend some time handling like tagging and the metadata, and I spent some time handling thumbnails and stuff, but it's just such a pale comparison when you compare the amount of time that you get out of that versus the amount of time that you get out of a video essay that takes like 30 hours to make minimum, if not longer. And at the end of the day, you watch for maybe 30 minutes or something. So that's obviously a big difference. However, I do think video essays are the direction I want to push the channel into. Like, I don't know really what I don't really care that much about the fact that they would be on this channel. It's more about the fact that I want to make content that's more like that, because I think you set an expectation to be very careful with how you select your words, very thorough and rigorous in how you make your points, and very clear with how you argue your positions. And, everything that you put there can be quoted. There's like a script. I'll probably end up linking the scripts because I want people to be able to have a textual copy of that. There will be, a synchronization between what you hear and what you see in the video. Like it's more than just audio recordings of a manuscript in that sense. Although I have considered just doing that instead of worrying about also all the video stuff. So at the very least, there will be essays. Hopefully there are also video essays, because I do think that you could use the visuals to demonstrate a point. You can also combine that with music a little bit more naturally than you can if it's just audio. And I do think that union of audio, music, spoken word, music, and video will combine to provide a much better experience than obviously LPs, but also just bare bones spoken word audio by itself. We'll see which direction I end up going into. Obviously, my time is at a premium right now, so I don't know if that's really going to be a main focus. Maybe I will end up just doing writing scripts and then recording, because that actually does not take me that long. But we'll see what happens when it comes to the actual editing phase of the video essays. Maybe we'll get somewhere, maybe we won't. But ultimately, I think the content that I produce will be much more convincing, much more well articulated, much more true to form. Much more true just by that standpoint. It won't be as rough around the edges, but it also just won't have the foibles that you see when I'm first feeling out like, oh, is this mechanic working like this? And then somebody will step in and correct me if I'm wrong. More than likely I usually am. One case happened exactly today when I was working on the Doom playthrough with Dynamo. And I said, oh, different guns do a different damage, because I misunderstood some point that he was making. And he stepped in and immediately corrected me and said, no, actually, it's just that this gun has a higher DPS or something like that. So it's very, very basic stuff. You don't get any of that when I've researched my shit. And, if I make a mistake, it's actually a mistake that I made in an environment where the overall agreement is you're not really supposed to make factual errors in a video essay, because you're supposed to have done your research. And so that kind of environment is where I want to be. I want to be judged at that level, and I can't be doing that if I can't be judged at that level. I can't be held to that standard if I'm making Let's Plays. And that's the standard I want to hold my conversations to. That's the standard I want to hold myself to in that sense. So those are the two reasons. Need more free time and need to make better content in general. That's why we're moving away from Let's Plays. I know this will come as a somber announcement to some people. Obviously, a lot of people do enjoy just sitting back and relaxing and watching some streamer yell for a while. But I have greater aspirations than being a streamer who yells for a while, at least when I'm doing my gameplay style reviews and whatnot, my analytical content. Now, when it comes to me doing mod streams or testing some stuff out or playing Fraud Night, there'll be plenty of yelling, so there's still that. You'll at least get your fix once a week with the Fraud Night stuff. But otherwise, at least you know what else is coming. So that was it. That was my very lengthy channel map. I hope you felt it was informative and motivating, and all the other positive emotions under the sun, except for satiating. You should go eat. Bye.